Welcome back to the channel. In today's story, we'll make you think twice before working the night shift, especially in a place like this. Imagine an aging seaside hotel, once grand and full of life, now mostly forgotten except by the ghosts still wandering its halls. In The Haunted Hotel Night Shift, we follow Evelyn, a young woman who takes on the lonely overnight duties at the eerie Grand Atlantic. At first, it's just creaky floorboards and cold drafts, but soon, Evelyn begins to notice far more sinister signs: phantom footsteps, laughter, and a mysterious silver locket that seems to hold a tragic secret. What begins as an ordinary job becomes a descent into the supernatural, as the spirits of the hotel's tragic past come alive in the dead of night. Stay tuned, and keep the lights on, because some guests never check out.
The Grand Atlantic used to pulse with life. You could sense it in the heavy velvet drapes, the way the burnished mahogany shimmered in the dim light, the subtle blend of sea air and aged perfume that permeated the atmosphere. It wasn't merely a hotel, it was a relic, overlooking the restless, blue ocean. Now, a hushed stillness prevailed, a slight weariness around the edges, catering to a handful of long-established, wealthy patrons and the occasional thrill-seeker yearning for a taste of faded grandeur. And me. My name is Evelyn, and the night shift was mine. From 11 p.m. until 7 a.m., the Grand Atlantic became my realm. Solitary, yes, but imbued with a peculiar tranquility. The lobby stretched vast and silent, the antique clock on the wall marking the hours with a dignified, measured rhythm. The only other sounds were the distant, steady crash of the ocean waves and the occasional sigh of the old building settling. I'd often find myself behind the grand front desk, engrossed in a book, the soft glow of the desk lamp casting my small world in amber against the encroaching darkness of the empty hotel. Mr. Whitmore, the daytime manager, a kind, portly man, mostly reminisced about the hotel's golden age. He'd shown me the ropes, navigating the archaic switchboard, the location of spare linens, the quirks of the notoriously sluggish elevator. He'd also offered a casual word of caution. Gets a bit drafty up on the upper floors at night, Evelyn. Old building, you know. Don't mind the noises. I'd chuckled. Drafts and creaks? Part of the charm, I presume. I thought I understood his meaning. The wind whipping off the sea could be fierce, rattling window panes and groaning in the eaves. The old pipes would gurgle. The wooden floors would settle and pop. I was prepared for the typical symphony of an aging structure. But I wasn't prepared for what I was about to encounter. My first disquieting experience was minor, easily rationalized. About a week into the job, around 3 a.m., I was making my usual rounds of the lobby, ensuring the doors were locked. I passed the grand staircase, its banisters smooth and cool beneath my fingertips. As I reached the landing for the first floor, I heard it, a distinct, delicate chime, like a tiny bell being gently rung. It seemed to emanate from the direction of the deserted ballroom, a cavernous space used perhaps once a year for a historical society gathering. I paused, listening intently. Only the wind, just the wind, I murmured to myself, shaking my head. The old hotel was playing tricks on my tired senses. The following night, it was footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps directly above me. I was in the small office behind the front desk, organizing invoices. They sounded heavy, like someone in old-fashioned, hard-soled shoes pacing back and forth in the corridor on the first floor. But there were no guests checked into rooms on the first floor that week. The only occupied rooms were on the fourth and fifth floors, near the top, where the newer suites were. Newer meaning from the 1950s. I went out to the lobby, craning my neck towards the ceiling. The sounds ceased the moment I entered the open space. Silence descended, thick and absolute, save for the distant waves. "Hello?" I called out softly, feeling foolish. My voice echoed slightly in the cavernous room. No answer. I checked the guest register again, just to be certain. Empty rooms on the first floor. I walked towards the staircase, my heart beginning to beat a little faster. As I approached the bottom step, a cold draft enveloped me, much colder than the general chill of the hotel. It carried a faint scent of sea salt and something else, something damp and unpleasant, like stagnant water. The air grew heavy, pressing down on me. I shivered violently, pulling my cardigan tighter. Then, a faint whisper, right by my ear. It wasn't words, just a sibilant hiss, like static electricity, but it felt cold and intentional. I jumped back from the stairs. My breath caught in my throat. Okay, that's not just the wind. I retreated back behind the desk, my eyes darting around the lobby. The shadows seemed deeper, the antique furniture taking on unsettling shapes in my peripheral vision. I tried to focus on my book, but the words blurred. Every creak, every groan of the old building now sounded like a deliberate movement, a presence. The events escalated over the next few nights. It was as if something had noticed my solitude, my receptiveness to the silence, and decided to make itself known. One night, while wiping down the counter, I heard the distinct sound of laughter. It was light, airy, like the giggling of young women, coming from the direction of the unused ladies' lounge on the ground floor. We didn't have any young women staying at the hotel. I crept towards the ladies' lounge door, my hand trembling as I reached for the handle. The laughter stopped abruptly. I pushed the door open. The room was dusty and still, filled with vintage furniture, paintings and mirrors. Empty. Another night, I saw a shadow detach itself from the wall near the closed-off ballroom doors. It was tall and thin, almost like an elongated person, and it moved with unnatural speed before vanishing into the gloom. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. I squeezed my eyes shut for a moment, then opened them slowly. Nothing there, just the imposing wooden doors of the ballroom, silent and impassive. The cold spots became more frequent, localized voids of freezing air that would appear suddenly and dissipate just as quickly. They often carried that same damp, unpleasant smell. Sometimes, I would feel a brush against my arm or the back of my neck, like someone walking too close, but when I spun around, there was nothing. Sleep became difficult during the day. My dreams were filled with empty corridors, echoing sounds, and a pervasive sense of dread. I was constantly tired, my nerves frayed. I considered talking to Mr. Whitmore, but what would I say? The hotel is haunted, and the ghosts are bothering me. He'd probably think I was tired or crazy. I started spending my breaks researching the hotel's history online. The Grand Atlantic had been built in the late 1800s, a marvel of engineering and luxury for its time. It had seen opulent parties, wealthy guests, and the roaring 20s. But the history wasn't all glamour. There were mentions of tragedies. A structural collapse during a storm in the early 1900s, killing several staff members. A notorious unsolved disappearance of a socialite in the 1930s. A fire on the lower floors in the 1950s that claimed a few lives. The most persistent story, however, wasn't about a major disaster. It was about a family, the Ravenscrofts, who had been permanent residents in the early 1920s. They were wealthy and influential, but their time at the hotel ended in sorrow. Their youngest daughter, Cordelia, a young woman of about 18, had supposedly drowned in the sea near the hotel during a sudden storm. Her body was never recovered. Legend had it her mother, distraught, refused to leave the hotel, convinced Cordelia would return. She died in her suite a few years later. Some said of a broken heart, others whispered of madness. The Ravenscrofts had occupied the large suite on the first floor overlooking the formal gardens and the sea. Suite 104, the suite directly above the office. The suite where I heard the footsteps. The knowledge sent a fresh wave of dread through me. The laughter, the footsteps, it all clicked into a terrifying pattern. Cordelia Ravenscroft. One particularly stormy night, the wind howled outside, mirroring the storm brewing inside me. Rain lashed against the tall windows, blurring the view of the sea. The electricity flickered intermittently. It was past 3 a.m., the loneliest hour. I was trying to read, but my eyes kept darting towards the grand staircase, towards the first-floor corridor that led to Suite 104. The heavy, oppressive atmosphere was back, thicker than ever. It felt like the very air was vibrating with an unseen energy. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed from upstairs. It sounded like a door slamming shut with incredible force. I jumped, my book clattering to the floor. My heart was pounding. This was different, more aggressive. Another bang, further down the corridor this time. Then another, closer. It sounded like a rhythmic, angry progress down the hallway towards the stairs. My rational mind screamed at me to stay put, barricade myself in the tiny office. But a morbid curiosity, a primal fear mixed with a need to understand, propelled me out from behind the desk. I crept towards the foot of the stairs, my flashlight beam a shaky circle on the polished wood. The banging stopped at the top of the stairs. An unnatural silence fell, broken only by the storm outside. Then, a sound that chilled me to the bone. Not footsteps, but a dragging noise. Like something heavy being pulled across the wooden floorboards at the top of the stairs. It was slow, arduous, and unnervingly close. I held my breath, straining my ears. The scraping continued, moving towards the edge of the landing. My blood ran cold as I imagined what might be making the sound. Not feet, not a person, something else. Then, a small object tumbled down the first 2 steps of the staircase and stopped with a soft thud. My flashlight beam settled on it. It was a silver locket. Tarnished with age, its delicate engravings barely visible in the dim light. It lay open, revealing 2 tiny, faded portraits inside. A stern-faced woman and a young girl with wide, sad eyes. A wave of pure terror washed over me. This wasn't just sounds or shadows anymore. This was interaction. My eyes were glued to the locket. Did it just fall? Or was it thrown? As I stood frozen with terror, the air around me grew intensely cold, the damp, salty smell overwhelming. The light from my flashlight dimmed, flickering violently. And then, a voice. Not a whisper this time, but a clear, sad female's voice, right behind me. "Where did you put it?" I spun around, flashlight shaking. Nothing. Just the empty, echoing lobby. My breath hitched. Put what?" I stammered, my voice barely a whisper. The locket lay on the stairs, its silver surface reflecting the faint light. The voice, soft and mournful, came from the top of the stairs now. My mind raced. Cordelia, the sea, her disappearance, a locket containing loved ones. A symbol of her heart. I don't know, I managed to say, my throat tight with fear. "I just work here." The atmosphere grew hostile. The cold intensified, raising goosebumps all over my skin. The old clock in the lobby began to chime erratically, its gears grinding. The wind outside seemed to shriek, and the waves crashed with a deafening roar against the cliff. Then, the distinct sound of multiple pairs of feet descending the stairs. Not heavy adult steps, but lighter, quicker footfalls. Clicking heels, shuffling soles, maybe even the tap-tap of a cane. They weren't uniform, but they were all coming down. And they sounded angry. I backed away slowly, my eyes wide with panic, fixed on the top of the stairs which were now plunged into near darkness as my flashlight flickered further. I could sense them now, a multitude of presences crowding the landing, descending step by step. They weren't visible, but I could feel their cold energy, their resentment, their presence. The air filled with a cacophony of faint, overlapping sounds. Whispers, sighs, a choked sob, a low murmur of displeasure. This wasn't just Cordelia, it was everyone. The staff lost in the collapse, the socialite who vanished, the fire victims, perhaps even Cordelia's grieving mother. The Grand Atlantic was a repository of sorrow and unfinished business. I stumbled back, tripping over the edge of a rug. My flashlight clattered to the floor, the beam dying out completely. I was plunged into near total darkness, save for the faint emergency lights and the ghostly glow from the storm-lit windows. The footsteps on the stairs picked up pace. They were coming faster now, a multitude of unseen feet rushing down towards me. The scraping returned, faster, more frantic, joined by the young woman's mournful voice, louder this time, filled with distress. My heart. Where is my heart? Panic seized me. I scrambled backwards, away from the stairs. I didn't dare look up. I could feel the cold air rushing towards me, hear the ragged breathing that wasn't mine, the frantic whispers swirling around me like a storm. I scrambled towards the office door, fumbling with the handle, my fingers clumsy with fear. The doorknob was icy cold. I yanked it open and dove inside, slamming the heavy oak door shut behind me. I leaned against it, panting, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I could hear the sounds just outside the door, the footsteps stopping, the whispers growing louder, more agitated. They were right there, waiting. The young woman's voice was closer now, a thin, reedy sound right outside the door. "You have it. Give it back." "I don't. I swear," I cried out, my voice trembling. Silence. Then, a slow, deliberate thump against the door, right at head height. Then another, not aggressive, but insistent. Like a small hand knocking. I squeezed my eyes shut, pressing my forehead against the cool wood of the doorframe. "Go away," I whispered. "Please, just go away." I stayed there for what felt like an eternity, listening to the hotel breathe around me, straining to hear any movement outside the door. The silence after the barrage of sounds was almost worse. It was a charged silence, heavy with unseen presence. Gradually, the intense cold began to recede. The heavy air lightened fractionally. The faint whispers faded, like voices drifting away on the wind. After another long while, wrapped in a blanket I'd grabbed from a shelf, huddled in the furthest corner of the small office, I heard the distant chime of the lobby clock. 4 a.m., then 5, then 6. The first hint of dawn began to filter through the tall windows of the lobby, casting a weak, gray light. The spectral energy seemed to shrink back from the encroaching light. The sounds faded entirely. By the time the sun peeked over the horizon, painting the sea in hues of rose and gold, the Grand Atlantic felt normal. Just old, quiet. I unlocked the office door, my hand still shaking. The lobby was empty, bathed in the morning light. The locket was gone from the stairs. There was no sign of the night's terrifying events, save for my own ragged breathing and the lingering scent of salt and dampness in the air. Mr. Whitmore arrived promptly at 7 a.m., whistling a cheerful tune. He didn't notice anything out of the ordinary. He commented on my pale face. "Rough night, Evelyn? You look like you've seen a ghost." I managed a weak, shaky smile. "Something like that, Mr. Whitmore. Something like that." He chuckled, oblivious. I clocked out, walking out into the bright morning air, the sea breeze cool on my face. The Grand Atlantic stood behind me, grand and imposing, hiding its secrets within its elegant walls. I knew I couldn't quit. I needed the job, but I also knew that the peace I'd found working the night shift was gone forever. The Grand Atlantic wasn't just an old building by the sea. It was a threshold, and I had crossed it. Tonight was the night shift again. And they would be waiting. Cordelia, her mother, the others. Waiting in the silence, waiting in the dark, for the girl who stayed alone with the ghosts of the Grand Atlantic. Waiting to ask me again about a missing heart. I closed my eyes for a moment, the image of the locket on the stairs burned into my mind. The sound of footsteps rushing down the stairs. The child's mournful voice. The night was coming, and the Grand Atlantic was waiting. And I had to go back. I slept through the day in fits, the bed drenched with sweat despite the morning chill that filtered in through my cracked window. Dreams tugged at my consciousness, images of crashing waves, broken teacups, and pale, silent figures lining the ballroom floor like forgotten guests. That evening, I returned to the Grand Atlantic with a weight pressing down on my shoulders. The sun was already dipping low, casting the building in long shadows that reached like fingers across the manicured lawns. I lingered by the staff entrance longer than I should have, the brass doorknob warm under my palm as if trying to dissuade me. But I had made my choice. Inside, the hotel was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of silence that had nothing to do with vacancy and everything to do with waiting. I checked the guest register. Only 2 bookings, an older couple on the 5th floor, and a single traveler in the newer wing. Nowhere near suite 104. I glanced toward the grand staircase. They would be there tonight. I could feel it. I went behind the front desk and opened the locked drawer where we kept oddments left behind by guests over the years. Among the tarnished cufflinks, a forgotten pair of reading glasses, and an old gold brooch, I found it. A small, silver locket, identical to the one I had seen on the stairs. It lay slightly open, revealing the faded portraits of a stern woman and a young girl with wide, sad eyes. I'd seen it before but never paid it much attention. A keepsake, maybe. It suddenly made a horrible sort of sense. Cordelia's locket. Her heart. That night, the storm returned. Just like before, the sea roared, the windows trembled, and the energy in the building turned electric. I kept the locket in my pocket. At exactly 3:32 a.m., the cold came. The lights flickered once, then held. I stood up, heart pounding, eyes fixed on the staircase. And then she was there. Cordelia. She stood at the top of the stairs, a faint shimmer in the flickering light. She looked like from another century, her dress clinging wetly to her form, blonde hair matted, skin pale as fog. Her eyes met mine, and they were endless. Hollow, not hateful, just lost. Behind her, shapes gathered, flickers of men and women in outdated clothing, faces blurred by time and sorrow. One leaned heavily on a cane. Another held a teacup that dissolved into vapor. A woman wept quietly into her hands. The spirits of the Grand Atlantic. I didn't move. Slowly, Cordelia descended the steps. Each creak beneath her feet echoed like a heartbeat. When she reached the landing, she stopped a few feet from me, gazing up with eyes full of longing and something deeper. I looked for it, she whispered. I nodded and reached into my pocket. I think this is yours, I said, my voice trembling as I held out the locket. She reached for it with small, translucent fingers. The moment her hand passed over mine, the cold intensified into a flash freeze, and the air was sucked from the room. I couldn't breathe, couldn't see. Then warmth. A rush of warmth like sunlight through a window, like a parent's embrace. I opened my eyes. Cordelia was smiling. For the first time, she looked like a young lady. And then, she was gone. The others began to fade, like dust swept into a breeze. One by one, they vanished, their sorrow ebbing away. The lobby grew still again, but not heavy. Not haunted. Quiet. Peaceful. I sank into the chair behind the desk, breathing deeply. The shell was gone from my hand. When Mr. Whitmore arrived at 7, I was watching the sea turn from gray to gold through the lobby windows. You look better today, he said with a chuckle. Whatever it was, looks like it's past. I smiled, this time genuinely. Maybe it has. That night, I came back again. The Grand Atlantic still whispered, still creaked and moaned and sighed. But the air was different. The cold spots were gone. The footsteps, the voices, the laughter, all quiet now. I still worked the night shift. Still sat behind the desk in the glow of the lamp. But I wasn't afraid. The Grand Atlantic had shared its grief, and I had returned what was lost. And now, it was just a hotel again. Old, majestic, and at last, at peace.
So, was it just the creaks of an old building, or was Evelyn really not alone during those long, haunted nights at the Grand Atlantic? The question that lingers, maybe most chilling of all, isn't what happened, it's why the ghosts reach out to her. Was it simply because she listened? Because she stayed? What makes this story so unsettling isn't just the footsteps, the whispers, or even the tragic backstory of Cordelia, it's the slow realization that some places hold on to sorrow. That even after decades, the echoes of grief, of longing, and of unfinished business don't fade away. They wait. Quietly. Patiently. For someone like Evelyn. For someone like you. So, next time you find yourself alone in an old building, and you hear a faint laugh, a dragging noise, or see something glinting on the stairs, ask yourself, what did they lose? And more importantly, what are they still looking for? Stay safe out there. And whatever you do, don't pick up the locket. Not unless you're ready to answer the question. Where did you put it? Until next time, sweet dreams and sleep tight if you can. Hey, horror fans. If you enjoyed our chilling tale and want to keep the spine-tingling stories coming, don't forget to hit that like button. Your support keeps the darkness alive. Share this video with your friends, let's spread the fear together. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications, so you never miss a hair-raising moment. Join our community of thrill seekers and prepare for more eerie adventures. Thanks for watching, and remember, stay scared.